All right, hello everyone. Right away, I want to thank you for coming back to my channel for another video. I'm here with this Christmas tree. So, yeah, hopefully that doesn't age poorly. Today, we are once again talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's what fiction can teach us. That's what we're talking about today, which maybe sounds a little boring, but you know, I swear I think it's exciting at least. So hopefully you'll hear me out. Right away, I'll ask the question that I know the algorithm is just dying for me to get to. And that question is, why do I think this video is worth your time? Here's why. Reading great fiction can teach us things like no other form of media. And my goal for this video, and I guess this channel more generally, is to help you achieve your goals and actualize your full potential. And I've planned today's video to do just that. I teach 1 or 2 reading and writing intensive undergraduate courses at Johns Hopkins University each semester. And I say that to give you some idea of, my passion for reading and my passion for writing fiction. So let's get into it. All right, at the beginning of each semester, I usually have a couple of students who are a bit skeptical about reading fiction. And maybe you are too. I think your feelings make perfect sense. My experience, both as a student and a teacher, is that most young people aren't told why reading fiction can be worth their time. And I think that's wrong because it does them a serious disservice. And to, let's say, talk about that disservice, I'll start with a question. What can reading fiction teach us? That's kind of the question that today's video is most fundamentally about. And maybe it's a question that you have, maybe it isn't, but I bring it up because it's something that I'm grappling with all the time with my students, and that's how to get my students excited about reading fiction, because that's what I want. I want them, looking forward to class. I want them engaging with the material, because, if I can put them in a headspace where the material appeals to them, it makes my job as a teacher, as an educator, easier. It makes in-class discussion easier and better. So really, that's kind of what I am focused on doing in the classroom. I'm not saying it always works, but that's kind of my goal. So I just want to set the stakes here and give you some idea of, what I think fiction can teach us and the value of understanding what reading fiction can communicate. So yeah, I'm, not saying every one of my students is always excited to come to class or that every student is always contributing. To clarify, I am trying to optimize my class time, and in my experience, the best way to get people interested in course material is to communicate the material's far-reaching importance to them. So I'll tell you what I tell my students, and I'll warn you that it sounds cliche because it is cliche, but if you give me the benefit of the doubt in a little time, I'll do my best to convince you of the power of reading fiction. Okay, so here's the cliche point, sentence, idea. Reading fiction can teach us to be better people, and it can do this because reading fiction gives us access to life experience that isn't necessarily our own. And I want to pause here to make an important point. To get some idea of what fiction can teach us, I think we need to talk a little bit about our expectations and how what we might expect to learn from a work of fiction differs from a work of nonfiction or a textbook or a STEM lecture or whatever. And I say this because I think it's worth pointing out that in order to get the most out of a great work of fiction, some preparatory work needs to be done in advance. We shouldn't go into the reading expecting to come out with a better understanding of something that really happened, the way we might if we watch a documentary or if we read a nonfiction book. Now, obviously there are exceptions to this rule, but again, I'm trying to give you some idea of the process by which I think works of fiction can teach us, I guess, just things, general concepts, ideas, for lack of a more specific word. Reading fiction gives us access to a kind of systematic complexity that I think is reminiscent of the real world, or that's kind of true to life. When we read a work of fiction, the language situates us in the world of the story, and it is in that world, I think, that we wade into some series of problems and some layering of meaning that can teach us something. So we're reading a great work of fiction, we're analyzing the text, and we're engrossed by the book. We can't put it down. Obviously, this is a best case scenario, but that's the way I think it should be. People should read the books that interest them, because there are billions of books out there. It's just a matter of finding one that interests you. So I'm talking about an ideal scenario because that's kind of that's what I think you should be aiming for when you pick up a book. You should be trying to pair yourself with a text that interests you and that feels somehow applicable to your life in one way or another, whatever that necessarily means to you. When we're especially interested in a book, when we're tearing through the pages, our attention is captured. And to have our attention captured by a book is to be continually finding interesting parts of ourselves in the book itself. That's an idea that the famous French modernist writer Marcel Proust had. So if we think about a famous novel, let's say Crime and Punishment, for example, part of what captures our attention is our ability to read ourselves into the minds of the characters, into the headspace of Raskolnikov, and imagine the world through his eyes. This is where we can start to get some idea of how fiction can teach us, what we can learn from reading works of fiction. So I'll stick with the Crime and Punishment example. I haven't killed anyone, at least not yet. Hopefully my landlord is not watching this, but by reading the book, I'm essentially engaging in an in-depth thought experiment that's going to give me access to the experience as it's described in the text. And in this way, I gain access to something that closely approximates lived experience. And I think once we are able to conceptualize how reading literature comes close to resembling lived experience, we can begin to get a deeper idea, or we gain access to a deeper understanding of what fiction can actually teach us and how it can enrich our lives. Okay, so we can't expect from fiction what we might be able to expect from a book about a historical event, or a calculus textbook, or a documentary, or whatever. But that doesn't mean, one, that we don't learn anything, and two, that what we can learn is somehow less valuable. I mean, sure, different information applies differently to different people's lives, but the point is this: everyone learns from the experiences they live through. That's why it's called life experience. It's the kind of learning that depends upon firsthand experience. So when we read a book that captures our attention, what's happening is that we're so captivated by the book that the text itself is causing us to vividly hallucinate a series of interconnected images. And these images grow out of us. We don't will ourselves to produce them. They just kind of appear spontaneously. They're subconscious. And by meditating with these images, we can learn something beyond our own life. So we can learn about the life of Raskolnikov, or Ishmael, or Elizabeth Bennet, or Jay Gatsby, or whoever, whatever, character and set of circumstances that they found themselves in. We can meditate with the experiences the stories offer to these characters, and in that way we internalize their experiences, their modes of being, and in this way we gain access to something that is larger than ourselves. We incorporate other people's ideas, their perspectives on the world into ourselves. It's like we're a sponge just absorbing kind of other ways of seeing the world. So I'll say this: fiction can be exciting if you can find the right book, and you should want to find the right book. If we read what captures our attention, my experience has been that we'll be rewarded one way or another. I can't say exactly how, but in unforeseen ways or unpredictable ways, let's say. But I think it's a mistake to expect fiction to teach us what could only be found in a textbook or a nonfiction book. It's important to understand that not every book teaches the same way, and also that there's not like one class of information that supersedes all other classes of information. It's when we talk about learning, there isn't just one way to learn. There are, I guess potentially endless ways to learn, but if you think about the idea of learning as a category, it goes far beyond just what you might do in a classroom. And I think that's what's so important about fiction. That's what fiction can teach us. It's like it teaches us something that is more human than what we might expect to find in a textbook or in a documentary or just in a classroom more generally, let's say. Reading fiction can teach us about the human condition in a way that nothing else, in my opinion at least, can. By getting access to the minds of complicated characters, we imagine ourselves into their shoes, and as a consequence, we learn from the experience of their lives. And that's how I think reading fiction can teach us. Learning goes far beyond just the memorization of facts. Learning has to do with truth. It's about wisdom and understanding and the fluidity to kind of see the connections between categories or groupings. And when we conceptualize great works of fiction as case studies of human behavior, let's say, I think we put ourselves in a better position to synthesize our lived experience with the distilled experience of other people. And that's how we broaden our horizons. It's how we learn about the human condition beyond our own experience. And I think that's what it means to learn from other people. Reading fiction offers us the opportunity to learn from people who aren't technically real, but who are kind of an amalgamation of realistic and truthful components in a way that is more real than if the events in the book actually happen. Okay, so that's everything I've got. Before I go, I want to thank you, my wonderful viewer, for sticking with me to the end. I also want to thank my editors, Joe and Bach. I couldn't do this without you guys. I appreciate you, and again, I will thank you one more time, my lovely viewer. If you found this video interesting or useful or helpful, I ask that you please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button, and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.